Okay, cheers, mate.
Thank you.
There we go.
Good luck.
You have to look in the camera.
Look at each other, bro.
Oh shit,
Stare
here we
lovingly
go.
into each other's eyes.
Hey, baby. Oh, God. It's not live, is it? Hi guys, welcome to the third of the 7 AUSA presidential candidate election. As most of you probably would have realized, Twitter is down, so we find it very hard to get questions. So if so, we've got an alternative way of doing it. If you can post your questions to the AUSA Facebook page, and I'll get them and read them out. But oh God, we've already got some questions that had already been sent in, so I'll read them out. But yeah, hello Rob. Rob is running for president. Rob is hoping to stay on as your president for education and employability. He's running against Ron reopen nomination. I'll explain it later on. But we've got 20 minutes to get to know Rob, why he's running, and where he sees the organization by this time next year when he is stepping down. So I'll just start off by giving Rob 2 minutes to tell us why he's running.
Hi folks, my name is Rob. I'm standing for re-election as your President for Education and Employability. We've had a really successful year and we've completely restructured the class rep system. We won £10,000 of funding to train your reps, and as some of you may have heard, we've had some big successes on things like library opening hours and getting more resources for your classes. But that's just the beginning. The reason I'm standing this year is that I've got a new manifesto based around transparency, fairness and a democratic campus. When we talk about transparency and fairness, what we're talking about is making sure that the university is always working for students and holding it to account if it's failing to meet your needs. That means things like scrapping unfair library fines, finding ways to get around library fines that debilitate students. We need book amnesties, we need caps on library fines, we need special exemptions for dissertation resources. We need other things that facilitate transparency and fairness as well. I want to see exam script viewing sessions so you can get solid feedback on your assessments every Refreshers Week, find out how you did in your exam and get dedicated academic support. And when I talk about a democratic campus, what I'm really talking about is how we get there, the mechanisms that we use to win those things. So I'm talking about academic assemblies. I want to launch a new method for students communicating about their classes and about the way they're taught to the university, collectively coming up with ideas about how those things can change. But we're also talking about building a democratic community on campus. I want to build a student manifesto for the general election that's happening next May. I want to make sure that education is firmly on our MPs' agendas and that we are in charge of what's going on a political level. And even on a student level, I want to make sure that students are represented in their workplace. I want to make sure that in your part-time job and in your work beyond university, you're represented by the democratic models that can support you in your job. So I'll campaign for those right now.
Okay, thanks. What is the personal reason why you're rerunning? Is there something that you haven't achieved this year that you would want to do next year?
The personal reason I'm running? There's nothing specific. To tell the truth, when I came back from Christmas, having done, must have been 5-6 months by that point that we'd been working in the office as SABs, I was feeling quite worn out by it. I was quite drawn. I was looking at what I'd achieved so far and thinking, am I really going to spend the next few months playing out those projects, trying to finish things I've already started? And of course, I want those things to be successful. I'm glad they're still moving.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I started thinking about how those could be improved, what we could build on, what we can achieve because of what we've done so far. That's what re-energized me and made me really excited about doing this. So there's so much progress to be made based on what we started.
Do you feel that you've able to balance yourself between employability and education? Have you done justice to both really?
So yeah, that's a very good question. We've had some tricky things going on with the employability side this year. We completely started the committee from scratch. We've done some really cool work on getting projects off the ground. At the moment, we're working on a student journal project, which I was working with departments on just today. We're rolling out a best and worst employers in Aberdeen campaign, which is going to be really exciting. And we're beginning some really cool work on support for students doing internships. But it must be said that education stuff does take up the majority of my time. I do spend huge amounts of time in university committees, and that's all education focused. So making sure that I'm working directly for students rather than becoming part of the university machine has been a learning curve this year.
Okay, so I'll ask you a question on the NSS result that we've already been sent in, the National Student Survey, for those who do not understand education language as I do, or as Rob do actually know me because I'm really terrible at education and stuff. What role do you think the National Student Survey should play in developing students' academic experience?
So I've got to be honest. I think the National Student Survey is awful, and the reason I think it's awful is that it's written as a satisfaction survey, and satisfaction is not an important enough measure of how a university provides things for students. It can tell you how students feel about it, how their education goes, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what's going on. The analogy that I always use is if you went on an EasyJet flight and you were given a free glass of orange juice, you would be very satisfied.
Yeah.
But if you went on a Virgin Atlantic flight and all they had was free orange juice, you wouldn't be satisfied at all. So it's all about the difference between expectation and reality. And we don't want universities to just get really good at managing student expectations. We need to be making sure that students understand what quality education is and have the power to change it directly themselves.
Okay, great. So the other question that was sent in earlier on, it's also on a similar thing. It says 25% of our student population are postgrads. How do you prioritize for the year ahead how do your priorities for the year ahead reflect a balance between undergraduate and postgraduate content?
That's a really good question. So this year, something we've started doing is a big research project into how postgrad research students and postgrad taught students are represented at an academic level. And I've been doing that with lots of postgrads themselves, and I've also been doing it with UCU, which is the union that represents postgrad students too. In the coming year, what I want to do is pilot the academic assembly models with them in particular, because I think that's a part of the university community that has the skills and the abilities and the interest in getting together and talking about how the university provides for them, not just in terms of teaching and learning, but as the community that they live in and the basis of their future careers. So it's something that I definitely want to work on very hard in the coming year.
Okay, another question that we have here says that following the university's claim that 96% of its graduates are in work 6 months after graduating, compared to recent figures citing 40% for graduates nationally, how will you integrate the employability remit into your work next year?
So that's really cool. Yeah, I've seen those figures. They are quite positive, though it must be said that some of that includes, when the university talks about how many graduates are in employment, it doesn't really make the distinction between graduate employment and non-graduate employment. It doesn't make the distinction between being on a grad scheme and working in Tesco. What I want to be doing this year is making sure that students have the tools to work in the sort of career that they want to when they leave university. And that's not about generic skills. That's not about teaching people to be employable, because all too often that means teaching students to be subservient to a labour market that isn't designed for their needs. I think that's about helping students find entry into the sort of work that they want to do when they leave university, including further study, and having a sense of what the options are. So I'm going to be working with the Careers Service to make sure there are dedicated careers fairs for every single subject. And I'm going to be mounting a workplace representation scheme so that students, when they're graduating, are used to having control over their workplace and want to be involved in the labour politics of wherever they end up.
Okay. I'll just actually ask a specific stuff now. What is the strength of the organisation?
I think the biggest strength of the organisation is the level of experience that's been built up by people who spend their time volunteering and working for this place. The amount of knowledge and skills is incredible. I think the biggest strength that we have yet to draw on is the agency and energy of the student body. Every single day, students come up to me and say, something's wrong with my classes, what can we do? Not, what's the university going to do, or what can you do? They say, what are we going to do? And that tells me that students aren't apathetic. It tells me that students want to be engaged with their learning and want to take control of what's going on around them. And that needs to be our main strength.
Okay. You talked about apathy. Do you think that how do we treat students right by saying this? I know there's a general idea that people talk about in terms of student apathy. We do sometimes say that it's about student not being interested. How do you feel about it? Do you think that students are generally not interested, or are we getting it wrong in thinking that?
Yeah, I don't believe that students are apathetic at all. When people talk about students being apathetic, I always think they're not apathetic, they're dormant. They're waiting to be woken up. And the way that you wake someone up is not to just tell them over and over again that they should be awake. You give them something to do. Okay. You help them achieve things.
Do you think we've given them students enough things to do? Because I'm sure there are lots of people who think that we've given also have got lots of opportunities for them to get involved, but they're just not getting involved. So we've not waking them up.
We've got huge amounts to do, and it's not just about asking students to do the things that we think are important. It's about helping students do the things that they think are most important. So we need to be in the classrooms. We need to be working with students directly day to day, engaging with students over their studies and over the things they want to do outside of university to really understand what makes them tick, and offering opportunities based on that, not on the things that we think are most important.
What is AUSA's strength?
You asked that question, haven't you?
Have I?
Yes.
Okay, what is AUSA's weakness? Sorry.
What's AUSA's weakness?
Yes.
I think AUSA's biggest weakness is that we haven't had the opportunity to do kind of big thinking planning recently. And that's for lots of different reasons. A lot of it's been to do with like how quickly the university changes and what the organisational priorities have been for a few years. But we haven't spent enough time thinking about what do we want this organisation to be like in 5 or 10 years. And we've begun that process this year with the new strategic plan, and we're beginning it again with designing a new building, which won't be around until 2016. That's so exciting. And so now is a time to take stock and say, what do we want the student community to be like in 10 years' time? And how can we help that happen?
Okay, we've also got more questions here. What student demographic, if any, do you see benefiting the least from the work you plan to do?
What student demographic will benefit the least?
Yes.
I think students that are... That's a really tough question. I think the demographic that will benefit least is students that don't want to affect change. I know that sounds silly, but I want to facilitate students who want to be active. I think the number of students who don't care about their studies or don't care about where they end up after university is so small that it's a demographic that doesn't really exist. But I've no reason to think that any of the things I'm doing will negatively affect postgrads or part-time students or anything like that.
Okay. And one thing that we kept getting was inclusion of AUSA. And AUSA is very insular. I think that's what someone said yesterday. And I know that was one of the greatest criticisms that the organisation gets a lot. What can we do to make the organisation more inclusive?
Yeah, I think part of the reason for that is that we spend a lot of time working on things that we're very fond of, things like things that go on in this building. Every time we say to students, come and find us at Butcher, we've already made a mistake. We've already said, stop doing the things that you're doing at university, come and get involved with the Students' Association. We've got to remember that every single student at this university is a member of the Students' Association. It doesn't matter whether they're in Butcher drinking coffee from Alfie's, or they're climbing a mountain in the Cairngorms, or they're sitting in a psychology lecture.
Okay.
We've got to be going out and being the Students' Association where they are. And I think the switch over to a new building is a fantastic opportunity to do that, because we're going to have to get out from these 4 walls and be the Students' Association in every lecture theatre, in every classroom, in every society, and completely re-engage with how students spend their time at university.
Okay. What student groups have you been involved with?
What student groups have I been involved with? Whoa, that's a juicy question. So it's interesting. People, I'm now one of these like quintessential AUSA hacks. Like I've been around for years.
So like AUSA and my Kia. So
I've been around a lot, yeah. But it wasn't always like that. For my first 3 years at university, I was mostly involved in student societies. I ran the Philosophy Society for a bit. I've been involved in things like Aberdeen Debater, sort of performing arts societies as well. Used to play a lot of music. And then I discovered student politics. I was involved in and still am involved in the Defend Education campaign, fighting for free, fair and funded education across the UK. And I'm still very much involved in student activism, both in Aberdeen and across the country. I think Twitter's back up again, Brett.
Oh, great. I'm good to just check it out. I'm going to run off questions soon. Oh, I would just like to do the question right good. Another problem that we got yesterday a lot was AUSA communication. That point, AUSA communication is not that good. And what can you do to make AUSA communication different from what it is now?
I think, we often fall into this trap of saying AUSA communicates badly. There is a difference between not communicating the things you're doing and communicating the things you're doing when they're the things that people don't want to listen to. So we often get into this trap of saying, we're going to have to send more emails and put up more posters and do more lecture shout-outs about the things we're already doing. That's a mistake. We need to start really thinking about, are we saying things that students want to listen to? Because then they'll communicate back.
How do we do it? Because we've got a strategic plan. At the end of every semester, you've got loads of questionnaires. You've got from AUSA, from the university, from your course. And these are all feedbacks. I
Mhm.
don't know the response rate. I know sometimes in the past it's been a bit low. So aren't we already engaging with students? Aren't we trying to find out what students want already?
We
So,
do, but we're doing it within a paradigm where we're asking students to tell us what we should do for them. That's the wrong way around. We should be giving students the opportunity to do things for themselves. And that means that AUSA needs to be a support network and a facilitating body that helps students achieve their priorities rather than taking them on as an organisation and saying, we will deliver this for students.
Okay, and I'm just going to answer a question that we've got here from Hannah. I don't know who she is. I don't know her name. As a current sub who is rerunning, how do you feel about the small number of people running for exec elections this year?
That's a good question. It is a small number of candidates, especially compared to the last couple of years. And I'm under no illusions. We've got huge amounts of work to do to get out and make sure these elections profile the sort of democracy we've got going on at the moment. I think there's various reasons that there aren't so many people running this year. Some of them just to do with who's been around in sort of what sort of roles. I think also because the current officer team has been so visibly busy. A lot of people have looked at that and said, oh, I don't know whether being a SAB is for me. It looks like hard work, which it is, but that's no reason to not think about it, guys, if you're considering it for next year. But there's another element of that too. I think it's played out in every single candidate running this year has written a manifesto that is about lasting change and serious proposals for how they want the organisation and the university to be. There aren't any candidates running this year who are what I jokingly call free condom SABs. There aren't any SABs who are saying, I will put on this event this year, or I will personally do this particular thing. Every single manifesto is a year-long project to change the lives of students in a lasting way. And I think that shows that the organisation is maturing politically and that students are engaging with it in a way that's different to most other universities.
Okay. And do you think the move to the new building will affect the things that you've got planned?
Yeah, and only for the better. Like I said earlier, it's a huge opportunity for us to get out of this place and start spending time being the Students' Association that is everywhere on campus, not squirreled away in a little building. Especially with things like academic assemblies and being in classrooms, being the Students' Association that takes on academic issues and changes the university. I think we can do that much better and we can learn a huge amount while we haven't got a secure space to hide away in.
Okay. What about, what do you think about the academic change, and do you think it will affect students massively?
The academic year change?
Yes.
Yeah, undoubtedly it will have a huge impact on students. I'm working very hard on this already to make sure that there's proper provisions in place. We've looked at the experience of St Andrews and Glasgow, who went through similar changes recently. And that flagged up things like student support services received huge amounts of student contact over things like stress, especially in the winter months, because the first semester will be very long. So we're making sure that those provisions are there and the students are properly supported. We're also making sure that the right information about what's expected from students for the coming year is being rolled out now so that they can prepare and that we are prepared as well to offer as much support as we can. I think there's lots of other things coming in the coming year that will make this easier as well. The rollout of OneSource and the new academic advising system, that's going to be fantastic. And we're also preparing the personal tutoring system to handle the needs of students under the new system.
Okay. The course reps, how was it when you took over from it? How is it this year, and how do you see it being next year?
Okay, so course reps, or program reps as they are swiftly becoming, the process of updating and developing that scheme began at the end of last year, and I was involved as a school convener in setting that rolling. The changes we've made at the moment are moving it towards a kind of program rep system, which means that students can talk seriously to the university about the things that matter most to them. I don't think that a staff-student meeting is for students to complain about how many handouts there were or whether or not their things were marked on time. Those are things that can be sorted out at a different level. But people do want to talk about how their degree programs line up with Erasmus, what the career opportunities are around their degree programs. They want to talk about how their choices for next year's courses interact with the other half of their degree if they're doing joint honours. Those are the things that students really want to be talking about, so that's what we're moving towards. I'm extending that in the coming year, if I'm re-elected, with an academic assemblies model that means the entire academic representation system can speak with one voice, that we can make serious decisions about things that students care about across the board, whether that's assessment and feedback or timings of exams and things like that, so that when an individual rep goes to their staff-student meeting, they're saying the same thing that their school convener is saying in the College Teaching and Learning Committee, which is the same thing I'm saying at Senate. Because we've got academic representation all the way through the university, we can use that so powerfully to change the way the university works.
Okay.
And that's what I'm working on this week.
Okay, if there's one thing on your manifesto that you would want to achieve, if you can't achieve anything, that one thing that you want to look back and say, I said that and I've done it, what would it be?
Yeah, it'd be silly of me to ignore the zeitgeist. We need to sort out library fines. And it's a miss for me to be talking about libraries again, given everything that's been going on
I'm going
this
to
year.
try and avoid the question.
But no, it's got to be library fines. Like,
Yeah.
we know that there is huge amounts of student money going into that library service that's coming from fines. And if students are being charged money, then the fines aren't working. They're there to make sure books are returned on time, not to punish students for making a mistake. And any time there is a financial penalty levelled against students, the university is already getting something wrong. We're not talking about people with loads of money. We're talking about students, you know? And so I want to completely tear up that system, make sure there's a way of the library getting the books back on time. There's huge amounts of research that's gone into this that shows library fines aren't the most effective way of doing it. I want to start that right now. I want the day after this election finishes to be able to go to the library service, say, I have got a mandate from students to fix this system, and we're beginning today.
Okay, 3 words to describe yourself in your manifesto. Just
Myself and my manifesto.
Yes, together.
Oh dear. Active, competent, democratic.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you the last question, right? I'm just going to wait for it to be 10 seconds so that, because I know if I don't ask you that question, people will probably kill me before I leave the building. What is the library open hours?
What are the library opening hours? The library today is open until midnight. The Taylor and medical libraries close at 10. But as of sometime next year, and I don't know the exact date yet, there will be 24-hour opening at Sir Duncan Rice Library.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. Good
Thank
luck.
you.
And
Cheers,
also, I just want to remind people, although Rob is the only candidate, for those of you who are not AUSA hats or who don't know anything about elections, there is something called reopening nominations, RON, R-O-N. It just means that if you do not like the choice on the list, you can take that one to reopen nominations. So I'll explain that a bit more later as candidates come along. So yeah, good luck once again. And if you want more information, it's on ausa.org.uk/elections, and the manifestos hopefully should be up by tonight. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That's right.
Are we done?